Hey, Jim, welcome to the show.
Jason, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. So tell us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, I am Jim Huffman. I'm the CEO and founder of Growth Hit. We are a growth marketing agency. So an accidental agency owner. I know you talk to a lot of those.
Yes. I mean, there's not very many that were planned, or maybe there was more. The ones that were planned, I really think it was they were so pissed off that they were working for an agency that didn't know what they were doing that they're like, fuck it, I'm gonna go do it better myself.
Yeah, the spite business. It's a great business model to be in.
Exactly. For a little while. And then you're like, really? I'm gonna let these people control me, but
Yeah.
we all need that chip on our shoulder in order to,
Oh, totally.
get next. Well, tell us, how'd you get started in the agency? You mentioned you're an accidental agency owner, so how'd that happen?
Yeah, I was living in New York, working at a startup, making peanuts, getting this thing called stock options, thinking that it's going to make a huge payday. And the startups were going well, and I'm not a developer, so that means you're marketing or sales, anything else. And so I did that for a couple startups, and I started teaching marketing at General Assembly. And I'd be teaching these classes, and afterwards, people would come up and be like, "Oh, I liked your class. Like, would you do a marketing plan for me, or would you do this or that?" And I was like, sure. Like, what do you charge? I was like, I don't know, $500. Like, I was horrible at pricing, still am. And that started to kind of snowball. And there, I was like working nights and weekends and mornings, and then it hit a point. It's like, what am I doing here? It's like, am I going to go all in on this or not? And so I got three people to basically offset my salary for 6 months, and that's how it all started. Was kind of that path.
I love that. Honestly, I do not know why we always default to $500. I defaulted when someone asked me for a website, I said $500, and I was like, dude, this is awesome.
Yes, yeah. They like paid me before I even did the work. I was like, oh man, I was like, this is easy. And then I had to do the work, and I calculated how much time I put into it and my hourly rate. I was like, I could have worked at Dunkin' Donuts and probably gotten a better deal than this.
Yeah, yeah. That's I have a shirt. It says, "Pay me for my expertise, not my time."
Yeah, I like that.
Let's talk about firing yourself from sales. A lot of owners, including me for a long time, until I got a little bit smarter or someone helped me get a little bit smarter. I'm not saying I'm smart. I'm just saying a little bit smarter. It's
Mhm.
not that hard. Go up a little bit. But we think as owners, we need to do all of sales because we know everything. And no one could know our agency better than us. So where were you in and like what triggered you to say, I need to fire myself from doing sales?
Yeah. Well, first, it even starts before that, where I started to get a taste of what it actually feels like to work on your business and not in your business. Where, I made a hire who actually became my COO and partner 2 years after starting the agency. And he came in, I was hiring for a junior role. And he's like, I might be a little too senior for this, but like, I read your newsletter. I think there's ways we could help. And he came in, and I thought I was really good at conversion rate optimization, and he was black belt. He's like done it for Uber Eats and everybody. And he came in and just like knocked our clients' socks off. And I was like, I just need to get out of the way. And when he did that, I started to have a little bit of time. It's like, oh wow, I can focus on these other things. And once that happened, I'm like, okay, what are the other things I can fire myself from? And you like start small, but then you go up and you go bigger. And the for me, the biggest and hardest thing is sales, because that is the lifeblood of it. And there's so much, because like with what we do, it's more of a strategic sale than a transaction based sell. So there's a little bit of a lightning in a bottle that a lot of like founders have, because it's your baby, you know what you do so well. But I knew that if I could get to a point where I actually have a business that can run where I'm not a cog in the machine, that's when I've made it. And so it's like it was just being focused on like, this is going to be super painful, but it is time to go all in on this. And that also meant that it's going to take a lot of my time to do training for people. It's going to take money because these people aren't going to be optimized on day one. So you're going to lose money. And by the way, I struck out twice on sales hires, and it was not their fault either time. It was 100% my fault. Like the first mistake I made was I hired somebody and then he's just sitting there because we didn't have the lead volume to support him. I was like, oh crap, we need more leads. And guess what? I have a marketing agency. I should know this. And like in hindsight, this is such an obvious mistake. So
Well,
that
did
was
you think that, because a lot of people think with their salespeople, you bring on a salesperson, you think they're going to bring you business because there's different types of salespeople. So
yeah.
did you think that, or did you like, this guy's a closer
I
or
was
gal?
so naive. I didn't understand the difference between like a hunter, like a SDR, a closer, like all those different options. I just assumed he's a sales guy. He will sell and he will bring me money. I think it was that simple. And now as I've learned these growing pains, I really think it's on me, the agency, the business, to build them leads, unless like we're about to make another hire for sales where it's very clear that he has to build his book and that we're going to be supplying kind of half of the lead volume and he has to go get the others. And so those have been tough growing pains, but they're ones that have made us better, right? Because with the first hire, I'm like, I will bring you all the business. You just focus on getting the script down and the sales down. And if you can close, we will figure out everything else. And so that was because another mistake I made is I hired somebody and I was like, oh, here's our CRM, here's our process, here's the automations, here's the Zapiers, like optimize that. And that stuff kind of doesn't matter, right? What matters is, can you sell? And so that was mistake number 2. With this third one, it was like, all that matters is, can you sell and close, right? That's all I care about, because me as the founder, that's what takes up so much of my time and my headspace. And so, yeah.
What we started doing when I would bring on salespeople, and especially for me to get out of it, I would literally start recording all of my calls, and it helps out. Most of our calls now are over Zoom. So I would record all of our calls and then I would take notes after, and I'd put them in different folders. And I would say, this is a great prospect. And this is what their challenge was. And this is what I presented.
Mm-hmm.
Or this was a bad prospect and here's why. And I would put these. And so before they even start, they have to accept the offer. I send them the recording so they can go through it and they can see how I run a meeting. The other thing that we did, because for years, I always try to figure out, why am I the best salesperson?
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I was the best salesperson was because I understood all the stories and the success.
Yeah.
So someone would say a problem, and then I could immediately go to my Rolodex and going, here's what we did. That reminds me of Coca-Cola, and here's what we did for Coke. Or that reminds me of Porsche. Here's what we did with Porsche.
Mm-hmm.
And we could bring them in, and then that would build trust. So, and we were just going off our methodology, right? So think about whatever your methodology in your agency is. So what we started doing was we started building a case story tackle box, like a success tackle box based on. So if you look at my business now of growing an agency, is attract, convert, and scale is our methodology. So we would basically create a Trello board and put the winning success stories for attract, the winning success stories for convert. Same thing with scale. And I would just go over one story a day. And my whole goal was the salespeople to understand those stories and eventually build their own.
Yeah.
And then that was their whole focus, and they crushed it. Now, there was things in there where, you have to make them sell the right thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I always talk about the foot in the door offer, like something easy that you can do versus selling the retainer at first. So that's what gave us freedom. And then how cool is it now when a salesperson sells something, you didn't have to do anything?
Oh, it's just magic. When I say I get a notification that a contract signed, I was like, what world are we living in? It's the most exciting thing. I actually want to hit on a couple things that you said because I love that point on the case studies. Because an issue I had with the salesperson, he's like, I can't speak to these case studies. He's like, you'll bring up things from a few years ago, and it's like, I don't know that. And I was like, oh, you're right. So we made like an archive of them, and we're still trying to like train them. I like that advice on doing it every day, because when they can go into vivid detail on those, it's really magic. Because when we can speak to a prospect and be like, oh, we know your problem, we know what phase of growth you're at and why it's hard, here's what the other challenges are, and here's how we broke through it. It's transformative.
Yeah,
um
what we would do on the Trello card, I've never been a big fan of case studies. I like stories because people remember the
yeah.
stories, right? And so we would title it based on the biggest challenge that they solved or the result that they got under those categories of our methodology.
Yeah.
So then, the sales team could go there and going, hey, this client's actually having issues with getting leads. Cool. Well, shit. David went from, selling $10,000 or getting 2 leads to 10,000 leads.
Hmm.
And then we can talk about the process, walking them through that. And once we did that, and just like you said, all I cared about was, could they relate to the client and did they understand the concept of consultation
Hmm.
and follow up? Not like the car salesman. Like, the best salesperson I've ever had was Darby, and he sold floors before he didn't even know what an agency was.
Yeah.
And within 2 to 3 months, he understood the concepts, he understood the stories. And now, honestly, he's better at consultations than me. Like, and
That yeah.
yeah,
I have a question on that, because one thing I struggle with is I can get a good salesperson that's likable, that can build the rapport and speak to the case studies, but sometimes you have those prospects that really want to nerd out. They're like, "Oh, let's get into like the Facebook algorithm and how you're optimizing against it." And a lot of times that's where I could like nerd out. So what we're doing is, we call them like growth leads, where we could allow them to pull them in to be the specialist, because that has been a roadblock. Because sometimes depending on the decision maker, they're like, okay, salesperson, that's great, but like I really want to go deep on the tactical. So that's something we're trying to
well,
figure
I
out
would
where
avoid
we
that,
land with the
honestly,
lead.
before they're a client.
Yeah.
Because like you tease them with that, like,
Hmm.
so we have our models, right? And so we have a tract, and then we have, well, in order to, and then we even have this assessment that the prospect does. So when we do an agency blueprint, right, we'll
Hmm.
say, well, do you have a defined niche? And the prospect will say, is it a red light, a yellow light, a green light? And so they'll highlight it. And then we'll go on to the next one and the next one. And then we'll ask questions about that. Right. So
Hmm.
then our salesperson can go and think about the stories related to that and what we did. And
Hmm.
so it keeps it high level, but
Yeah.
it allows visually for that prospect to see that versus getting into the details. You never want to get into the granular details at first.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of take it back from that prospect and kind of say, look, let's just kind of talk high level here. And then here's the next step. And then like you sell the foot in the door, and then that discovers a particular challenge that they have. And then the next thing that we would present would be like some type of project. Do you want
Yeah.
us to fix this? And then we can get into the details. And then that's when like a more specialist comes in
Hmm.
versus training your salesperson to be that specialist.
Can we talk about foot in the door? Because again, I'm on like a real high right now from a foot in the door thing that worked. It's a sample size of one, but I'm like about ready to change my whole pricing model off of this one example. So usually we like have a two call close process. We do this conversion optimization assessment, and then I'm going to sell you a package. It's like 10K per month, right? And
Mhm.
that's a 30-day close time on average. Something happened where we are getting phone numbers, and one came in, it was a legit lead, and I was like, I'm gonna call this person right now. I called them, And he's like, I have 10 minutes to talk. Perfect. I got a feel for where he was at. And I was like, do you want to talk tomorrow? We put on the call. I got him on the phone the next day, and I knew what he wanted. And I did this foot in the door package where it's like, hey, we can do this quick assessment, and then happy to do that thing at this hourly rate. And then we can kind of see where it goes from there. He signed a day after that. So we closed within 72 hours, foot in the door. And now it's about land and expand. And I'm just scratching my head on like, what's the better approach here? Because it's like, can we prove we can land and expand with this? And that's the opportunity. Or no, slow down to like speed up the sales process on what we've traditionally been doing. So it's something I'm wrestling with around pricing and close pace.
So I'll go back to one of my first clients. They came to me. They were an SEO agency. They sold $5,000 a month retainers off the bat, but for month to month.
Yeah.
And their sales cycle was basically 60 days. They had to do a ton of meetings. Their closing rate was like 30%. It sucked, right? And then clients would cancel 6 months out, which is a whole nother issue. So basically every client that they would bring in was worth 30,000. And so I was like, well, let's kind of work on your offering. Let's develop a foot in the door, which we'll talk about in a second. And then that foot in the door will lead to a project and then a retainer. So I said, the foot in the door, we're going to charge $2,500. I'll tell you what it was in a second. And then the project, because I asked them, I said, how long does it take the client to get results where they're happy with you? And he's like, 2 months. I'm like, cool. We're going to do a 3-month engagement.
Yes.
We'll charge $15K. And then we're going to charge a retainer because we've already built trust. They've seen results. You're going to charge $9,000 a month for 12 months. So now every client that they brought in is well over the 6-figure mark, and it's locked in for the year. And so when I'm looking at a foot in the door, something that is going to convert, and anybody listening to, there's a free masterclass I have out there. If you go to agencymastery360.com/convert, it'll go through the foot in the door decider. There's a lot of different resources, but I look at it on a 4 different kind of points for deciding on a foot in the door. What's the perceived value to that client, right? Like if you look at it like a graph, like a line up, that would be perceived value. And then on the right, going from left to right, it's kind of, is it easy to create for the agency? Like speed of execution.
Yeah.
And then you got to ask, does what I'm doing here lead to the logical next step? And then one of the most important things to think about when you're building a foot in the door or doing it is it being co-created with the prospect or the client? And how do you get the owner out of it? So a lot of people start with reports or proposals, and that's a mistake, because if you think about it, it's a low value to the prospect. Right. Or if you think about an audit, well, an audit's kind of low value. It's a little better than a report, but still low value. But if you can do like a 1 to 2 hour consult where you're breaking down where they're at, where they want to go, even better. And so that's how I would decide on a foot in the door of like, what are you already doing that you could slice off your core service and then go down those 4 items and ask yourself, because then once you can do that, because if you think about the prospect, right? The prospect is struggling with these 3 things. They're like resistant. They're thinking, will the concept work? Do I trust the approach? And do I trust this person? Like, how are they trying to trick me?
Yeah.
And then the agency's thinking like, most agencies go into a pitch with lack of confidence, right? They go, they're like, is the message right? How can I explain my process? And am I talking to the decision maker?
Totally. Yeah.
And so it's like the agency's pushing. And so if I push on you, what are you going to do? You're going to push back. And so if you can kind of switch it, like you just saw in the foot in the door, you're going to close within a day. And like, I would literally just send them to an order form while they're on the call with you, just to get a credit card for $2,000. Like,
No, I love that. And because I'm kind of obsessed with this idea of like leverage points in the business, where if you can make small tweaks, how it could have not a 10% gain, but like a 10x gain. And going from like a 30-day close to a 3-day close is transformative. And it's something that I'm really trying to think differently on how we can break that. Because we all know as agency owners, we know the physics of our business model and it's based on people. There's certain things that are just hard to scale and to go to the next level on. So when you have those advantages, go for it. So you think that's I guess it depends on the persona, but I'm also thinking with the end goal in mind. What's that price? If it's like $2,000, $3,000, five
Doesn't
grand,
matter. So
1,500, yeah.
like literally, because how I would present it, I would always say, here's, Jim, there's 3 possible outcomes of doing the agency blueprint with us.
Mm-hmm.
1, you'll love the plan, you go execute it yourself. That's the case. I wish you luck.
Yeah.
Number 2, which is the most common, you'll love the plan and you'll want to work with us. And then we could talk about the details of that. Number 3, you don't like the plan. No problem. I'll give your money back. So there's nothing for you to lose.
Yeah.
So what you just did, you eliminated all risk. The only risk they have is just wasting their time.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, I love that. So you're saying don't do like because what we would do is like, here's your assessment. We get into the analytics, we do an audit, we even do like some mock-ups and we build the roadmap. You're saying a consult is better than maybe an audit or an assessment because they're getting that kind of strategic firepower and plan.
Exactly. So, well, all you need to do is think about they're looking for why are they looking at you or any of the agencies in the world? They're looking at solving a problem the fastest and getting to a result. So if you can figure out where are they at now, where do they want to go, and what's the biggest challenge? And so your job is to figure out that challenge and where they're trying to go. Like the prospect always lies to you. So you need to figure and be good. Like the salesperson that you hire needs to be really good at asking questions. So like when you hire a salesperson, they better be asking you a lot of fucking questions, right? Like if you're the one talking all the time, like I would never hire that salesperson. Like I'm very vague with them. I don't follow up with them. Hell, when with our mastermind members, a lot of times when they're hiring a salesperson, I'll be like, look, dude, you got to tell me when you're about to do this, but when you're about to hire a salesperson, introduce them to me. Say, hey, I have an agency coach. He wants to interview you. I'll ignore him 3 times. I want to see if they're going to, how they're going to reach me.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I've heard the thing too. It's like you get a salesperson, don't give them the offer and make them like persuade you on why to get it. But no, that's good advice.
Yeah. But those are just some of the sales systems that, that's the whole reason why you want to build a sales system. Where you have this process that can convert like within a couple days. Your conversion rate will go up to like 70 to 80%. So when you start looking at that, like you said, the little movements, the little tweaks, like those are huge, big fucking leaps.
Yeah.
Because most people are converting at 25%. If you're converting 50% more, faster and at a higher price, like that's a huge jump.
Yeah. And I like I'm a huge fan of like the Irresistible Offer by Alex Hormozy and risk reversal and guarantees. I love your point on there's 3 outcomes and the third is you don't like it, your money back. It's kind of a no-brainer. And I think a lot of people listening, like we're already doing these elaborate assessments and proposals that aren't free to us. They take time and money. So we might as well be monetizing that.
Well, yeah, you should. Like it's a game changing for a business because if you think about it, it makes it easier for the salesperson to position to sell. It makes it easier for them to explain it because it's a very easy step. For the prospect, it's easy for them to make a decision because they can test before they really kind of invest a lot of money. Like it's just, you're like kind of pulling the prospect to you versus like you're shouting at them. You're kind of like, if I whisper, right, what are you going to do? You're going to lean in versus like, if I shout, you're going to be like, Jason, shut the fuck up. Like
Yeah.
You're going to lean back.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, totally. Oh
So,
man, sales. It's like, and I think a lot of like agency owners. I had no sales background, sales training. You're usually good just because you know the service and the offering so well, and you're passionate into your baby. But to truly level up, it's like I'm like, okay, let me read spin selling. Let me get coaches and mentors and figure this out. And it's a little painful, like going through that. And it's going to take time and it's going to take money, but it's the necessary evil. Is if you can unlock that, sales cures a lot of problems. It creates problems, but those are good growing pain problems. But it can solve a lot of problems you have at the agency with capacity,
yeah,
margins. Yeah.
I tell everybody you're either entering the storm or you're in the storm. Like when and I tell the mastermind members when they join the community, I say, look, we're going to solve your biggest problem. But when we solve your biggest problem, that's going to create other problems. I'm just warning you, right?
Yeah.
You start converting more and bringing in double the amount of business, that's going to put a lot of pressure on other things.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's what I always tell people is like, it's better to be with a group of people because then they're like, hell yeah, I went through that. Don't worry about that. And then you just be like, oh, okay, if they went through it, I can get through it.
Yeah.
And then you kind of start cranking.
Totally.
Before we wrap up, you mentioned to me in the very beginning, before we hit record, I find this very interesting. And I think it's a really cool strategy because I've only seen it a couple other times. You used profit within your agency to buy a B2C company of who you kind of go after in order to use as a model and to get your foot in the door with other. Tell us a little bit more about that because I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big goals we have as an agency owner or as an agency is let's take our profits and buy companies. If we're such a good growth team, why can't we grow our own stuff? That gets me really excited. And it's how I've been able to get some really good talent is selling this dream. But it was time for me to cash in on that and deliver. So it was we've looked at it buying things, we've struck out, didn't work. Serendipitously, we had a client that has a really impressive soccer brand, sells goalie gloves to like professional soccer players, Premier League, and they had this product sitting there. And they bought this IP for 6 figures to make truly sweat-proof shirts. It was initially for the military, and it was doing nothing. And I talked to him. I was like, I want this. I want to be a part of it. And so we struck up a deal. We were able to own basically 50% of the company with them. They're really good at making products. We're horrible at making products. We're good at marketing. They're not good at marketing. So it's a match made in heaven. And so the exciting thing is there's so many times with clients, sometimes we're like, just get out of our way. Like, please let us just like go on this. So this is our time to be our own client. And so it's been like so exciting to just kind of go. But the accidental thing that happened that was genius is this idea of building in public. I'm a huge fan of following companies that build in public, right? From ConvertKit and Nathan Barry to the guys at Copy AI, where you can see their journey. So it's like, let's do the same thing. So that's our content marketing strategy, is to show what we're doing at this brand, which is neat. So for example, we redid the website. We showed how we did the photography, how we optimized the website. We got the conversion rate from 0.6% to 3.6%. We got the average order value from $50 to $100. We show how we did that with bundles and upsells and cross sells. We show the top ads that work and don't work. And as I'm sharing this allows me to go into communities of other founders and business owners, talk about our company, and then they're like, "Hey, who did that for you?" I was like, "Oh, the agency that I have, Growth Hit." And all of a sudden, we're getting business from it. But here's the best part: when we get on a sales call, because I hate getting on a sales call where it's like, "All right, you're a CRO, like growth team, cool. I'm talking to 10 others. What's your price? Why are you special or different?" And I'm like, "Oh, great. This is a race to the bottom." This makes these competitive deals non-competitive because they're like, "Oh, I see what you're doing with Neat. I love that." And a lot of agencies aren't doing that, putting where their money where their mouth is. So it goes from not being a sales call to almost an onboarding call. So hopefully Neat goes on a good track and it does whatever. But the byproduct of it is it's a great marketing engine because guess what? marketing against other marketing agencies is really hard. We all have our own special process. We all have our own like blog posts.
People, process, and awards. Come on. I mean, God, that's it.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
And
Like,
and so that's been that's been something that's interesting, because we do an email newsletter, and we do a lot of content like a lot of people, and our content about Neat like doubles or like 5x's our normal thought leadership content.
yeah. So I want to go into a little bit of details and tell me what you can't say. That's fine too. So I love that you bought 50%, because then the people, like you were saying, they know how to build products. Let them keep building products. So did you guys go back and forth on evaluation? Like, did you come up with, was it money that you bought, or with time and materials, like sweat equity?
Yeah, great question. It's both. We did put up some money, and then we also committed to a certain amount of like resources that we're going to be putting into it. So it's kind of like a hybrid of those two.
Okay.
They had raised a little bit of funds to pay for that intellectual property. But the cool thing is, this is a partner we've worked with already. We've been with them for 2 years. So we already have a good relationship, and I see how good they are on the product side. Because when trying to like start a company, you need to be very honest with yourself with where you're strong and where you're not, what you know and what you don't know. And we've tried to launch our own products, and guess what? We're horrible at making products. We don't know how to talk to manufacturers, how to find manufacturers, how to source, how to give feedback. These guys are black belt at that. So we're like, okay, that's your lane. Our lane is everything growth and website and marketing. And so that has been really helpful.
Anything that you would switch or do different? Would you do the 50-50, or would you ask for 51?
I don't know yet. I like that we have skin in the game, and show me your incentive, I'll show you the effort. Like, everyone is going towards the same thing. The other thing that I think was important, we were aligned from the start. Like, as we make money, not to like pull it out and do dividends, it's reinvest everything. So I think if we hadn't had that conversation, we could have some awkward conversations down the road. But so far, no complaints on the setup. So yeah.
And last question on that is, are they paying your agency, or is it a discount service, or is it it's like,
No.
here's how much work we'll do every month for this part of the
It
sweat
wasn't
equity?
even as formal as that. It's like, we will be the growth team on this. And guess what? You're the product team. Like, I see the hours they have to put in as they're doing testing different warehouses and manufacturers. They see the hours that we're putting in. And so, yeah. And because I do think if all of a sudden we're like starting to count pennies and do things, it could be a little dicey.
Yep.
I mean, there's going to come a point where we're going to need more resources, and we'll have to have those conversations. But yeah, we're both like have our teams committed to it.
Okay. I like it. Well, awesome. Well, Jim, is there anything I didn't ask you that you think would benefit the listeners listening in?
No, I mean, one thing we kind of hit on is like AI and that stuff. And the only thing I would say there is, man, is like, we kind of saw it with people going over, like getting work overseas, and we kind of followed that, where we're like, hey, we get amazing talent overseas, and we can pass the savings through to you on certain types of services. And with AI, we're trying to do the same thing. Just get ahead on like, okay, what are these tools where we can be faster, cheaper, better, and then pass that through to the client. But that means we have a certain budget and time we're dedicating to tinkering, which can look like you're just wasting money and time, but it's like we're hoping to find some breakthroughs with like different ways to deploy it.
Okay, cool. Awesome. What's the website people can go and check you out?
Just growthhit.com is where we're at. And then the brand we acquired is neatapparel.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jim, for coming on the episode. And guys, if you want a lot of the resources and tools to help you with the foot in the door or building the sales team, it's a free masterclass I put out. Go to agencymastery360.com/convert, and it will show you most of everything that I felt you needed to know. Obviously, I can't do everything because every situation is different. You need customization. Don't copy everything. So, and until next time, Have a swank day.
I hope you enjoyed this content. If you want more content like this, make sure you click on the link on the screen or check out your most popular podcast platform where the full episode is there. And until next time, have a swank day. What are you doing? Go check it out. Click on the link. I'll see you soon.